Okay, this is chapter number 8 in 8.1. 3 different types of algebra questions utilizing fractions. So the first question says 3x is equal to negative 2/3. So I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And normally I would show it like this, but we're not going to show it like this here because it ends up looking like a big fraction sandwich. And rather than divide by 3, I'm actually going to write it like this. And I know that that's the opposite operation, so I know whatever negative 2/3 divided by 3 is going to be the answer for x. And since dividing by 3 is the same thing as dividing by 3 over 1, and when we learned how to divide fractions, we learned that if you keep your first fraction and change the operation to multiplication, and use what we call the reciprocal of 3, which is the flip, then we could rewrite this in both of these equations, both of these expressions. We know through our practice of the questions when we did the previous are going to give us the same answer. So therefore, the answer is going to be negative 2 over 9, because when you multiply negative 2 by 1, you get negative 2, and 3 by 3, you get 9. So the answer is negative 2 over 9. In the second question, is different than the first, because in the first question we divided both sides by 3. And in the second question, we have a half of x. So what we're going to do algebraically is we're going to multiply both sides by 2. And I'm not going to show it like this, because we're dealing with fractions. Instead of multiplying by 2 that way, I am going to do it this way to isolate my variable x. But I'm going to multiply by 2 like this. And since it's a whole number, I'm going to treat it over 1. And if you cross-reduce, because when multiplying fractions you can cross-reduce, 2 over 6 will reduce down to 1 over 3, and you'll end up with x equals 5/3, which is equal to 1 and 2/3 as a final answer. Now, if you don't cross-reduce, you would end up with 10 over 6 as your answer, which is 1 and 4/6, which is still 1 and 2/3 as a final answer. And in your last question, you have a coefficient of negative 1 1/4. So we know we're going to divide both sides by the coefficient to get rid of it. So that's what we're going to do over here. But over here, I'm going to divide by negative 1 1/4 like this. So I know that by dividing both sides by negative 1 1/4, I isolate x. And now I have to figure out what this actually is. So when dividing mixed fractions, the easiest thing to do is change them to improper. So this is the same question. And when dividing fractions, it's the same thing as keeping your first fraction, changing to multiplication, and using the reciprocal of the second fraction. Now notice I didn't keep the negative symbol with the 5. You don't have to. And it doesn't even matter where you keep that negative symbol. It's a negative 4/5, whether the negative symbol is with the 4, with the 5, or in front of the entire fraction. It's still negative 4/5. Cross-reduce will give you negative 1 over 1. And your answer will be negative 7/5, which is equal to negative 1 and 2/5. Now, if you didn't cross-reduce, you would end up with negative 28 over 20, which is negative 1 and 8/20, which is negative 1, and both are divisible by 4, 2/5 still. Either way, you get the same answer.